Okay, chapter 5 is the integumentary system. And if you have not heard of that word before, integument covers the hair, skin, and nails. So we don't have the skin system. We have um, the integumentary system because it's really encompassing skin, hair, and nails. And within the skin, so if you can see, we've got hair and nails down here, which we'll get to in a bit. Within the skin, we have the epidermis, the top layer, epi meaning above or upon, and the dermis. Under that, we have subcutaneous tissue. Okay. We also, within the dermis, have some accessory organs, some glands, sebaceous making oil, and sudoriferous making sweat, which we're going to define those terms in a bit. The general structure and function is to protect from pathogens. Our skin is our first line of defense. Any break in the skin causes us to be vulnerable. We produce sweat and oil. We have nerve endings in our skin that detect heat and cold and pressure and touch. Our skin keeps us warm or sweats to keep us cool. Our skin synthesizes vitamin D, and our skin gives us color from melanocytes. Okay. The epidermis, meaning above or upon dermis, the outer layer of skin, there's three medical terms that if you're following along on your terms list, you'll need to know. Cutaneous, dermo, or dermato. If you were to go to a dermatologist, that's the specialist in the study of the skin. We learned this one, melano, in chapter 4, that means black. And the color of our skin is determined by melanocytes in the basal layer of our skin. The fact that we are waterproof, that's good that we're waterproof. Otherwise, we take a shower and take on a lot of water weight. Is there's a keratin hard protein in the epidermis that gives us like a protective layer that makes our skin waterproof. And that term is kerato, and it means horny tissue, hard tissue. I imagine that if you looked under the microscope, keratin would look jagged. So keratin is that hard protein which makes us waterproof. You'll see in the special senses chapter, kerato also has to do with the cornea of the eye. That's why that's included. Okay, in that middle area, the dermis, the second layer of the skin, we have oil glands. So SIBO is referring to sebum, which is, or sebaceous, that has to do with oil. Hydro is the term for sweat, kind of sounds like water or hydrate, or sudoriferous glands. Our fat tissue, which is important to have some subcutaneous fat, is adipo, like adipose tissue is referring to fat. Lipo, everyone's heard of liposuction. And steato has to do with fat tissue. Now, steato, if that comes up in your breaking down of terms, a lot of times that is steatorrhea, which is like diarrhea with fat in it. So that's 99% of the time you'll see steato used is steatorrhea. Okay, the accessory organs of our integument. I mentioned it was not just skin. So nails, the terms for nails are unguio or onkyo. And I've got no way to remember that except that they're really weird. Unguio and onkyo are nails. Pilo and tricho is hair. The integument is part of our skin. So unguio, onkyo, nails. Pilo, tricho, hair. Some cancer terminology because, always looking for different types of cancer in the skin. Squamo, if it's squamous, pertaining to scales. Squamo means scales. So in this case, this mole would look scale-like. And carcino has to do with cancer. So carcin is the word root for cancer, and we know that oma is tumor. So that's tumor of cancer is a carcinoma. Different therapies. So cryotherapy is cold treatment, and hydro, now be careful here because we had hydro with an I, and that was sweat. Hydro with a Y is water therapy. Hydro is water here. But hydro, if we go backwards, hydro right here is sweat or sudoriferous glands. So a little bit of difference, very close. Okay, wound care. Debridement is a vocabulary term that has to do with if you have dead or necrotic tissue, removing that from a wound so the wound can heal, right? Depending how deep or how bad or involved that wound is, they'll put the person under anesthesia. Culture and sensitivity has to do with a lab test. So my example in an in-person class is if we were to swab someone's throat for strep throat, that's the culture is to determine the presence of streptococcus, right? The presence of pathogen. Is it positive or negative for strep? The sensitivity part of it is what type of antibiotic will that pathogen be sensitive to. So in other words, if Johnny had lots of antibiotics as a child and penicillin and things like that, penicillin may not work against his strep throat. So that's a lab test, and it's to determine, first of all, what is the pathogen, if there is one, and what kind of drug is it going to be sensitive to. That's culture and sensitivity. Pyo refers to pus. Okay, myco has to do with fungus. So mycosis is an abnormal condition of fungus. Or a mycal infection is a fungal infection. Pruritus has to do with intense itching. So very, very, very bad itching. These pictures, if you like Dr. Pimple Popper, you might like this. These are pictures of abscesses. So it's a localized collection of pyo or pus, usually staph, at an infection site that either got nicked or there was some kind of opening in the skin, and there's an infection, and now a large abscess has formed or collection of pus. And many times it's around hairy parts or parts of the body that have a lot of friction, things like that. So anything with a lot of moisture or irritation, you can develop an abscess. Sclera or sclero, the word root combining form sclero, has to do with hardening or the sclera of the eye. In this chapter, it has to do with hardening. In special senses, we'll talk about the sclera or the white of the eye. But scleroderma literally means skin hardening. It's a condition where your skin gets hardened. SIBO, we mentioned earlier, is sebum or that oil. So seborrhea is discharge or flow of sebum or oil. We also, in this case, in this picture, that's like dandruff or cradle cap or certain types of eczema. Pediculosis is a fantastic word, and that means lice, typically head lice. So pediculosis is lice. Hope you don't forget that one. Alopecia is baldness. Now, not just male pattern baldness, but baldness for any reason. So alopecia is baldness. Pallor is a medical term for any kind of unnatural paleness or absence of color. And diaphoresis has to do with sweating. So your sudoriferous glands are overactive. Dermatology, the study of skin. Okay, so again, we have a Lex practice section where you can go ahead and you can ask yourself, abnormal condition of fat. Think for a minute. Adiposis. Now, in this case, you don't know if it's liposis or it's steatosis. I don't know. That just comes with time and practice, learning which one goes there correctly. On tests, we typically give people correct. I would give you if you got one of the three correct, because you just wouldn't know. I'm gonna go ahead and scroll forward. Let you practice. Okay. Lots of practice in this one. This is good stuff. Okay. So we're at the end. Onchopathy, this disease of nails. This wraps up chapter 5. So what I would recommend to you, in addition to making flashcards, is go ahead and practice, go through these cards and practice. Okay, and practice. Ask yourself and then quiz yourself and then answer yourself. Okay? And see how in this case, lipocele or adipocele, you wouldn't know which one it is. So in this case, either one is correct. Okay? I hope this was helpful.